half a day, and welcome to Coffee with the Candidates. This series was created to educate and inform Guam's voting population on the positions candidates running for office take on some of the island's most controversial topics. It's gubernatorial episode number 2. This episode will feature the Leon Guerrero and Tenorio Democratic team. Stay right there as we will hear from both candidates.
Half a day and welcome to Coffee with the Candidates. I'm Andrea Pellicani from News Talk K57. Joining me today, one half of the gubernatorial ticket, Leon Guerrero Tenorio. We've got Mr. Josh Tenorio joining us in the studio. Half a day.
Half a day.
Welcome to our studios.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have to say, you're relatively new to the political scene, and there are maybe still a lot of people unsure about who you are. Tell us a little bit about Josh.
Well, I'm from Sinajana, grew up and born and raised. Come from a very small family. My dad is Jesus Atoigui Tenorio. He died in '94 in a car accident when I was 20. My mom is Therese Francas Tenorio. She's a retired school teacher. I have one sister, and but lots of extended family. I've been working in all 3 branches of the government and in the private sector, so I think that makes me a little different from the rest of the candidates. And although I haven't run for office, I have been involved in policy and politics since I was 15 years old. So
you sound like you come from a very similar family to mine, having a little bit of a balance on being a little bit in government, but also have a strong background in private sector. You just recently came from the courts.
Right.
And then we got word that you were going to be running for almost highest office.
Right.
What led you to say, okay, I'm going to do it?
Well, Lou and I had spoke for maybe about 6 months. And, she talked to me about her plans, what her vision for the island was. And it was unexpected, but she asked me to join the team, and I really thought about it. And after the last election with the results and everything, I called her up and I said, let's do it. So literally that afternoon, I went to the Chief Justice and the presiding judge, told them I have to quit, and I planned on transition out of the court.
Tell us a little bit about some of the values you hold, at least with what you feel our government should be doing, what you feel our government is not doing right, and how will that lend itself to Leon Guerrero Tenorio ticket? I
think that fairness is a big thing that is needed in the government. And part of fairness is transparency. So when everybody thinks or believes and knows that it's a fair playing field, even within the government, I think you have more productivity. If people believe and know that they have a fair shot at getting promoted based on their experience, their credentials, and the work they've been doing, then the people that don't get selected are able to back that decision. So when there isn't fairness within the government, becomes a problem of productivity. For the customer of the government, the people, they should be able to go to the government to receive services and get the same information no matter who they are, no matter what time of day. It shouldn't matter who's at the counter. It should be consistent. That's my basic vision for how the government will be a more high-performing government. I also think that safety is a big concern for our island, both in the criminal justice aspect, also in the healthcare aspect. I think the government needs to be compassionate. It can't look the other way when we know we have some problems. So, the long-standing meth addiction problem our island has, homelessness now, especially kids. We should be able to act on emergencies that are happening and not look away because we don't know what the solution is. And I think that the government is there to facilitate prosperity. Shouldn't hinder business, it should facilitate it, but it should also make sure that we have an even playing field. So that's that's my view on how it should be.
Well, I think that's a good position to take. With the economy looking the way it's looking, with the government crunch, fiscal crunch that's happening, there have been discussions about possibly abolishing the office of the lieutenant governor. Every administration comes in, and based on the strengths of the lieutenant governor, the governor will then assign that person to do what's within their capacity and what they're really good at. Where do you think you could fit in at a loop, and what areas or issues do you think that you would like to be on your high priority list as a lieutenant governor?
I think we're fortunate. Our team is fortunate because we've been partnered for a long time now. So we have developed a lot of the plans that we want to push forward together. We've been listening to a lot of the same information. We complement each other very well, and so we will have a good working partnership. But looking at the law, the primary duties of the lieutenant governor, one of them really is that clearinghouse. The lieutenant governor is supposed to be involved in monitoring and really performing the best when it comes to leading the performance of for federal funds. And so in 2017, you saw the news, $44 million sent back to the federal government of Guam entitlement money. Obviously, there's a problem there. So for me, in a situation with a cash crunch, you need to maximize the kind of programs that you need to do, push out that we have with the Fed funds. And I would say, at least for what the statutory responsibilities are, I would definitely have to start working on that. And I do know lots and lots and lots about that kind of stuff.
Well, that's good to hear, because you don't often hear about the clearinghouse within the lieutenant governor's office. And again, depending on what your strengths are, but that is definitely something that has been designated to the office of the lieutenant governor. Where do you think we could make improvements to expending the federal money that we receive, or at least be compliant? Because we know that has been an issue as well, being put into high-risk status for some federal money. Where do you think we could immediately make some improvements?
You have to do a lot of planning. So planning, a lot of times money is unexpended because there are problems with procurement. But it could be that sometimes the request for procurement is happening too late in the game. And so you have to be very upfront with what you're doing. You have to take a look and see what the government is promising. A lot of times these grants go in and we have the government making promises to do things, and you have to be realistic whether or not we can accomplish that. So I think planning and the execution, you need to make sure that the grants are, they call it SMART. You know, you have to make sure it's realistic. You have to make sure that what you're doing is measurable, and you have to be very clear with what the compliance issues are. So engaging and working with the employees in the front line that are operating the programs and having communication is the key. But I really think it's planning and the execution. And my background at the court, for sure, I know I can make a big difference on that. We have at the court, probably have the most effective federal grants program. We really minimize if there's any if there's any underspend, you shift it to areas within the focus and the purpose of the grant so you can maximize the funds that you have. But you also don't push in things that you know you can't sustain.
All good stuff. That's probably the most I've heard about the clearinghouse, actually. And so it's good to see, based on some of the newer news stories and news items that have been coming out.
I mean, 44 million, that's a lot.
It's a
shocking
lot.
to me.
And with a lot of the complaints about where is government money going to, trying to eliminate waste, the one thing that we don't want to do is waste opportunity when it comes to federal money.
Can I tell you that $1 million of that was for suicide prevention and drug treatment? So if you know that those are two crisis areas, why would you be pushing back federal funds? It doesn't make any sense to me.
You have taken, and we've chatted before, you and Leon Guerrero have taken a strong position on the economy, as well as the hospital. Tell us about some of the ideas that you're putting forth and how we can make the government of Guam more solvent and open opportunities for the people of Guam.
I think you really have to prepare for the future. So with the military buildup, you need to make sure that the agencies that are in charge of facilitating the projects and regulating them know what the projects are, to make sure that the military is doing things according to the plans that were approved. And you have to understand where the leakages are. If I was a part of the build-up planning process, both in the administration and the legislature, I'll be trying to catch some of these things that are happening. So sometimes there are leakages where companies are performing, but they're not being taxed, and we're missing out on that opportunity. But in our platform, I'm really looking at a lot of the younger entrepreneurs. A lot of people, the younger people, they don't want to work for the government, but we have a lot of creative people. So, you know, we have a co-working concept that has been a model throughout the United States where the government comes in. It would be GITA to give some seed money to start and invest in some capital needs that young business owners wouldn't have the capacity to afford, so that they can create products. And the other thing I wanted to say is we're sitting here on a gold mine with our location. It's not just military strategic, it's economically strategic. So we know that there's going to be a lot of high speed cable internet lines that are going to be running through. There's a move to have redundancy in Asia. So the Guam of the future needs to have a local workforce that are technologically driven and are able to be part of the new economy. I think there's going to be data storage centers here because of that volume of cable coming through, and I think that there's going to be a lot of excellent business opportunities for people that especially want to return home. We have a lot of family and friends that are working and living in the States that have a lot of things that they can offer to really lift up and have higher paying jobs. So that's kind of like our vision for the economic side.
A lot of opportunity. I think you
Yeah.
talked about it just that real quick minute. Again, you've been working behind the scenes a lot. This is your first real big opportunity to stand in front of some of these issues. If there's one thing that you want the people of Guam to know about Josh Tenorio, who is he?
Well, I'm very committed, very loyal to the island, but I'm always looking to try and improve things. That's been the reputation I've had in all the three branches and in the private sector. I'm always open to change, but it's always change that is informed by things that are, past experiences. And my big skill is dealing with people, always trying to understand what kind of contribution they can make into the team and giving them resources to increase productivity. So wherever I'm at, I'm always looking at trying to affect morale, because I believe that high morale equals high productivity. So that's kind of that's my management style.
Well, you've always got a huge smile on your face.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a boost to you being able to bring the morale up for everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, Josh. And we look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
We'll be back with more of Coffee with the Candidates when we return. Welcome back to Coffee with the Candidates. I'm Andrea Pellicani from News Talk K57, and joining me, gubernatorial Democratic candidate Leon Guerrero, also former senator. Welcome to the station and welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
I've been enjoying your press releases coming in. You've taken very bold positions on a lot of the issues. Been very clear about what you would like to see for the government of Guam. One of the things that I just learned just in the past couple days is you are in support of delinking from the federal tax code. Tell us about that, why you support that, and some of the ideas that you could bring forth as writing our own tax code.
I am in support of it because I really think we could get more revenues by just controlling our own tax code. You see, when the federal government passes any kind of tax policies, we're greatly affected. So having our own opportunity to control that would provide us a much more resource, I think, and much more opportunity to relate it to the times. And so I'm very much in support of it. If we do, there's going to be some transitional period. There's going to be some documentations back to the federal government about how we handle our budgets. So I think we can do it. It's a challenge, but I'm very open to the challenge.
How would you be able to get the community resources together? Because obviously we're going to need some of the best brains at the table to be able to write our own tax code. What would you be able to do to get everybody in the community to get involved as part of the process?
Well, there have always been in the past, Andrea, tax commissions that have looked at and studied the advantages and the disadvantages of delinking. And so I would certainly invite the experts, legal people, the economic people, and business people, our public also, to get their input and work with them and how best we can do this. And we'll certainly use a tax expert, we'll use a legal person that's focused on tax issues, and certainly use also the economic and business people, like I said. So that's how I would do it. I would call a commission or a blue ribbon task force to get together and go over what we can do. Of course, involve government agencies that are affected by it. So,
sticking with the economy again, you've been very strong about your position and what you think we could do to improve our economy. You have taken a position where some others have taken a different position to prepare a short-term budget based on the fiscal crisis that we've seen. And we're watching the legislature as they painstakingly put together this budget for fiscal 2019. You've had your fair share of days in the legislature trying to put that budget together yourself. Tell us about why you think it would be a better idea to put a budget together for the entire year rather than to address the immediate needs and then kind of take a restart approach
Right.
at the start of 2019.
Well, I think you need to have a yearly budget because it just makes for better planning. It just makes for better understanding of what your revenues are going to be, what your expenses are going to be, and so that you can better manage your financial and your fiscal policies. I think that it's important to have that information, and we already know what's going on with our economy. We can make the assumptions, and based on those assumptions, we can then have our financial plan. So I think a 6-month budget isn't really a good idea because it's just not certain what the next 6 months would be, and so it doesn't really provide us for any kind of foresight on what we plan to do for the fiscal year. So I don't think it's prudent kind of way of managing your fiscal policy and your finances.
You've been strong about coming out to collect what could be, we're looking at close to $200 million of uncollected taxes. And now we're hearing that number is actually 73 million of collectible taxes. What are some of the lost opportunities that we have bypassed, and what can we do to trim down some of this tax leakage?
Yes, and I was watching the budget discussions, and the revenue and tax person was trying to explain what those numbers are. But a lot of those are also pending opportunities to collect the taxes. So 70 million, I don't think is really the figure that I would use. I would add all those other figures in that are pending, and then you'll have a greater picture. So collecting those taxes, I think, would be a much, much better opportunity and way to bring in our resources for our revenues. And of course, looking at the expenses that we need to cut back. And for me, when you look at expenses, you also think about, well, how can we make it more efficient in the government? What can we do to increase the efficiency of the government? Because when you do, you know this in any kind of improvement process that businesses look at, when you improve efficiencies, you decrease cost. And then what happens is you have a better customer service and services that you provide to the community. So, for example, I would go down to the trenches and work with the employees at the front line because they're the ones that know the processes of that work. They're the ones that know what's happening. They're the ones that can actually provide the solutions. So if you have a process that or a program or a service that needs to be delivered and it takes 10 steps, maybe we can do it in 3 steps. And as a result of that, we can cut back waste and make it much more efficient. And I don't think the other candidates are thinking about that. They're not really talking about it. They're just talking about, let's cut government agencies to reduce costs. But you could cut government agency in the size and still have an enormous cost. So the goal is to reduce the cost. And so our way is going to be working more succinctly with the processes and also with the employees that know area of expertise. And then what happens with that is the employee feels good because you have now involved in the employee in improving their work service and their work area and their environment. So they'll have more incentive and motivation to come to work because they've contributed. So you've not only decreased the cost, improved efficiency, but you've respected and acknowledged that employee.
That's a big deal for you.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Your employees, we know a lot of them active in the community. We see them involved in community organizations, as we've always seen the Bank of Guam participating as well, and you see all the Bank of Guam employees participating as well. So that's definitely a sign of practice what you preach.
And my belief is this: an organization is an organization of people. You know, like take K57 or Sorenson's. If everybody left tomorrow, what's going to happen? You're not going to be able to operate, you're not going to be able to provide the news, you're not going to be able to be in touch with the community. So when you talk about organizations, when you talk about government agencies, when you talk about businesses, you're really talking about the people. And the best leader is the leader that knows how to manage people. And both Josh and I have had experience. Josh has supervised over hundreds of people. In the Bank of Guam, I have supervised and managed over 600 plus people. So the leader, a good leader, is a leader that knows how to manage people. You read literature now, and you read at big organizations, successful businesses, when they ask the executive, what is the one skill that is needed to be successful in a business? They will invariably answer that it's how you manage people.
I'm glad you bring that up, because the government is not just employees. The government of Guam is the people of Guam.
Yes.
And based on a few of the news stories and cases that have come out in the past year or two, based on some of the audits that have come out from the OPA, when there's an ethics complaint, it seems as if there's nowhere for that ethics complaint to go other than to the body that governs itself. We have an ethics commission in law, but has never been impaneled by the governor. And we're seeing that basically the state of how everybody feels in the community right now, it's sort of creating a hole or gap in enforcement within the government of Guam. Being that nobody has impaneled the ethics commission, how do you think you could resolve some of these ethics issues, even coming out from audits where the OPA can't forward any ethic questions to anybody because there is no body to review it?
Well, if there is a structure by law that allows ethics complaint to be investigated, then I would follow that. You know, I would impanel it, or if it's not the governor that impanels it, then whoever the entity is that impanels that commission, then it should be done. Because when an ethics complaint is a really serious complaint, you know, when a senator accused the GMH that there's corruption there, an ethics issue, you don't just say that. You have to have some really hard documentation or facts to go to that kind of a serious allegation. And when that happens, then it has to be investigated. But before you can really say that, you have to seriously recognize that there is a concern. And so the seriousness has to be overseen by an objective body that will give that person who's accused of an ethics complaint the due process and the objectivity to make it happen. You know, it's really a very serious, like I said, accusation, and it's also a very important kind of commission to impanel. So I will work with what the rules are, the laws are, or whichever government entity, whether it's the AG or the OPA, or, you know, a special prosecutor, whatever, then I will work and cooperatively be involved in whatever documentations they need or any kind of, you know, investigative processes.
Character and integrity are important. Ethics is important for the people of Guam at this moment. In closing, one word, how could we describe the character of Leon Guerrero?
I think trust.
That's a good word. I think that's what the people of Guam are looking for.
Yes.
Good luck to you. Could potentially be the first woman sitting in the seat at Adelup for highest office. We're looking forward to watching you on the campaign trail and keeping on top of all those issues. Thank you so much.
I'm very excited, and so thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining us for Coffee with the Candidates. We'll see you next episode.